Hello，大家好。We want to start out with a quiz。咁我哋而家有個 quiz，你有2分鐘嚟做。Okay, so let's take a look at some of the really strange things about Cantonese. We share the same kind of issues with Mandarin, um, but the problem is maybe more irregular and more acute than otherwise. So, and when you see my screen, what you will see is that there's quite a spread of answers, and the reason being, even when we have just one single character, it could be wa when we are talking about a noun, and it could be wa when we are talking about a verb. For example, we have a conversation here between a boss and an employee. 你畫畫好啦，唔好做其他嘢啊。And so this would be you just draw the picture, don't do other things. And the second one is the employee replying, 畫好啦，老闆幾時出糧啊？The picture is finished. When are you going to pay me? Then the boss reply, 嚇，出糧？I need to pay you. And the last one is, 老細唔好講笑會嚇死我。Don't joke with me. I'm going to be scared to death. What happened here as an interesting feature is that we see that it is exactly the same for glyphs, but they are pronounced differently because the intention there is a little different. The first one is 畫好啦, you only draw a picture. The second one is 畫好啦, the picture have been finished, completed. And maybe a bit more surprising is the 哈, which in simplified Chinese, it is simplified from 哈, which is to scare, whereas it is a very common particle used in traditional Cantonese. And we cannot make the default always going to be traditional because the type simplified is the one with the 人字邊一個本字, one of the second questions there. So the pronunciation is very context dependent, and which creates one of the problems with how people find that when they go onto online Yutping generators, they get stuff that are almost right, but not quite right enough. And often whatever they generate for you, you want to be able to have an escape hatch And you don't have that escape hatch. Whatever they generated for you as a picture is the picture. And you have nowhere to intercept and make the change when the context is different. So I thought it's going to be a simple problem. It's going to take 3 days. And then 3 days turn into 3 weeks. 3 weeks turn into 3 months. And now 3 years is coming along. So this is my answer to this question. When I started, the idea of this actually started about 7 or 8 years ago. I was in a school and we were running a Hong Kong 101 project. And we talk about teaching Cantonese is really quite difficult because when people see something like this, they don't really know what is the difference between that and this. They require first associating a number with a tone, and there's nothing regular about why 4 should be the lowest of the 6 and while 1 is the highest of the 6. And it's not very intuitive. So part of the innovation of the Cantonese font is that we have these kind of tone marks so that people can just look and go, okay, this has to be high, that has to be low, and it actually make a lot of the pronunciation a lot more easy. In fact, when I try it with my friends recently, they don't even need explicit instruction. They just hear it a few times and they're able to pronounce the whole thing without even worrying about the tones. And they get it mostly accurate. So that is one of the assets. The last question I had for you there was about what is the shortest Yue Ping and what is the longest Yue Ping. One of the questions that comes about with what if you have tried to set Yue Ping, 如果你嘗試過自己做粵拼嘅話, you are going to discover that there are ones that are very short. There are ones that are very short, 有啲好短, and then there are some that are very long, 有啲好長. What that means is that if you have the ones that are short and the ones that are long next to one another, then it's going to be very irregular. And if we want to have poems, then it makes it almost impossible to set in the classical expected way. 譬如我哋詩詞歌賦，我哋會覺得係5個字5個字，應該係等佢嘅。但係如果粵拼好長好短嘅話，咁點樣可以令佢哋等佢呢？ So this is the Cantonese font, and let me show you what it does. At the heart of it is a very, very simple tool where the only thing you need to do is you type. And what I'm typing here is with Azak's TypeDuck Cantonese input software. It's a perfect complement to the visual font. It lets you go from Yue Ping into a Chinese character and back out into a Yue Ping. This used to be a very leaky process, but the two tools together make it possible to do pretty much a round trip. 咁我哋基本上個字體嘅主要功能係我哋可以有個中文字，每一個中文字佢都可以出返個粵拼俾你。And what is kind of fun here is that if you have noticed, I've introduced a space in there. What happened here is that if we were to remove those spaces, now the font can see it in the context and it's going to go, okay, 三思而行, because this is one piece. So the moment it can see the two things together, it knows it is one context and it's going to change that pronunciation accordingly. So that is, and when we benchmark it against maybe somewhere around by now 30,000 characters worth, it works on both colloquial and vernacular Cantonese. 書面語、口語都大部分 OK，而成功率大概係99.7%左右。And the accuracy is around 99.7% or so over vernacular and colloquial Cantonese. One of the other questions, one of the most common questions that people have at this point is, you are showing us with Mac, does it work with Windows? And how do you actually install this on Windows or on anywhere? Because you have never installed a font before. 大部分人都係未安裝過字體，起碼未自己安裝過啦。So why is now the polling quizzes is back on my screen? So this is my Windows installation on my Mac. And all you need to do here to install the font is you just double click on it. And then you say install. Sorry, there's the polling quizzes that keep coming up. And 3, 2, 1, that is it. It's done. And it's really 2-click installation. And then when you come into your Word, you can type. If we have some text here, then we can, let me make it larger so you can see more clearly. All you need to do is to come over and say, I want to change it to use the Cantonese font. And then the Yutping comes for you automatically. That's really all you need for the most part. One question very often is, maybe I'm teaching my student and I am saying, this is 車，我哋教緊字，我哋想話一個字有幾個讀音。We want to say one character has multiple sounds, and this is 車. But in some contexts, 有某啲情況之下會係居. In some contexts, it's called 居. So what you can do, there are 2 methods for adjusting the pronunciation. If you're not sure, then you can attach a squiggle behind it, and it will automatically cycle to the next one. And if you have very strange characters like ni, what you are going to find is that there are actually a surprising number of possible pronunciations for one character. I think the most extreme is something like 13 or 14 different very similar pronunciation. If you are on a Mac, then there's one more possibility, which is for you to come along and say, I know exactly which pronunciation I want, so I am going to type the Yutping, and it's going to absorb the Yutping and change the pronunciation for you. So you can tailor your pronunciation even in a standalone context.
Sorry, explain again how you did it. I just saw like there was a dot and
okay. Let me do that with 譬如我哋揀個字we know this is standalone is probably whole, but maybe we want to say whole hog, whole. We know the pronunciation is going to be HOU3. So all we need to do is to append a dot in front of it and then stick it right next to the character. Then that changes the pronunciation to the exact one that you wanted. If you're not sure what it is that you want, then you can use the squiggle. So that's usually the key on the left-hand side of your numeral 1. Every time you type it, then it's going to change it until there's no more pronunciation to cycle through. Okay. At this point, I'm going to call our first question and answer session. And if you have questions, fire away either in the chat or you can fire away by unmuting yourself, and Willie and Journal C is going to help me moderate the questions. I see Kit is question Can I type in a Chinese traditional character to get a romanization and tone indicator? That is exactly what the tool is doing. And for while the questions are coming in, I'm just going to show my favorite demonstration for people who are just waiting for other people's question. Mousy asked, does it work with simplified characters? Yes, it does, but with some limitations. The context sensitivity. So for example, if you were to type, let me find you a well, what happened here is that I have a separate window down on my other screen, which have all kinds of things that I might need for this presentation, and I'm just going to copy and paste them in here. It technically works. All the glyphs are there. If you are asking how many glyphs are there, it covers all the pronounceable Cantonese characters, including Japanese style Chinese character, simplified Chinese character, for a total of about 30,000 characters.
Oh, wow.
And 40,000 pronunciations.
Mm.
What it doesn't do very well is that it doesn't know how to do the context-aware pronunciation change, at least not in most cases.
Oh, I see. So if you had the simplified... Oh, sorry. So if you had like a character like ha, like a word like ha fu, it uses the same traditional character as ha. So would it be able to detect that the
It would not be able to
character pronunciation there is ha?
Especially not there's about 60,000 contexts that it recognizes, but if it is a little strange, like the one that you have quoted is a little unusual, then it wouldn't be able to do that.
Oh, I see.
There are limitations.
Can you toggle through the various pronunciations?
Can toggle through the pronunciation. So, for example, if I were to have ha, then I know exactly what I want. If I want ha, then I can come along and go.
Oh, right. Yes, you can always manually override.
Or I can simply come along and go squiggle, squiggle to toggle through. And it may be a bit surprising that one of these have so many ways of reading, but that's
definitely.
But that's one of the value of what we're doing here.
Can I ask, does it work with more obscure characters too, the font, like second round simplified characters and some shorthand forms?
How inappropriate can I get here? I'm scrolling through my list and I'm thinking about a lot of inappropriate characters to put in here. Actually, I'll only show some acceptable characters. So for example, maybe we don't think about it, but there are characters that we use in Hong Kong, like leap. It's kind of a strange character. It's a kind of borrowed word from English, that elevator, lift, and then we change it into a Chinese character. This does not exist in the Unicode standard part. And then we have some yitai and we have some alternative variants, which we use a lot in Hong Kong, but it is also part of the extension plane. 而我哋香港用嘅特殊字 簡體字、日型漢字、繁體字，總共係大概3萬個，你基本上你讀得嘅字都會出現到嘅。
原來咁。
What if I cut and paste a traditional character into your template? Can it recognize it? Yes, you can. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to copy and paste in one from my other window a piece of Chinese text and then show you what you can do there. Ooh, that is a little messy. So for example, if I were to have a piece of text that I get from somewhere, all I need to do is to select those text and come along and say, I want it to be in VF Cantonese. Then it is going to give you the Chinese character together with the Yutpeng. This is part of my training for my wife. 過去搭過國泰，去過泰國, and it's just kind of fun for me. One thing that you notice is that it's a different Chinese character and the sizes are different because I know people are learning Cantonese and maybe at the beginning they just want to be able to speak something without necessarily want to recognize a few hundred characters. So that a couple of different variations where you have regular size, where you have large Yuping, and where you can bold the Chinese character. There's a number of ways to play with it. One of the quite interesting things that I will talk about a little later was that if you select some text and you hit the italic shortcut, so it's Command-I on a Mac, that turns off the Yutpeng. So what you can do is to prepare mixed text for intermediate and advanced learners that have some Yutpeng, but not all the Yutpeng. Do these fonts work in Google Docs? No, it doesn't work in Google Docs because Google Docs doesn't let you upload custom fonts. You do not have the option to change your font there. Google Font have asked if they can put it on Google Font. There's some problem on the business side with that. Do we have other questions? 木木問嘅問題係可唔可以用嚟做商業用途，例如博客嘅海報？One of the question is, can you use it for commercial purposes, like poster of a podcast? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can use this for commercial things without needing a license. You do not need to, without needing any extra permission, and you do not need to pay me any royalty. 你可以用嚟做任何嘅商業項目，而你係唔需要俾任何版權費，亦都唔需要問我攞授權。It would be great if you can help me promote the font by attributing, but even that is not strictly necessary. In fact, there has already been the font have been published in May, and there is already a book about Yupeng that had been published and in the market. 好，咁我哋再落去就可以講第二啲奇怪嘅用途。And our second part here is to talk about the things that are not related directly to Yutpeng. By the way, if you are one of those people who like vertically aligned things, you can also just turn on vertical text and it just kind of work. So if you like to write your poems vertically, it also just works. Let's talk about what not font related stuff there are. One of the things that you have actually seen is that you can type any Yutpeng. And let me change it back to just English input. And it's going to automatically format it for you because maybe you are teaching and you want to tell people that you can. And you want to say, actually, English also have tone. So Sarah is Sarah. And then you have in ne son no. So you have an international. English have tones in that sense, and you want to show it. You don't want to figure out how to type these funny symbol. You don't need to do nothing. You just choose it. If you change it to the other fonts, it just look like this. You change it back, then it look like that. It makes it very easy for you to create your own thing. Does it work if I just go ZCC? No, it doesn't. It recognizes most of the Yutpeng that most of what will be valid Yutpeng and then a little bit more. What is a little bit more? Maybe you want to explain that sometimes we transliterate English word into Chinese, like 佢係我 fancy. Fan is not a valid Yutpeng, but I make it work. C. So this is one in ta. Okay, 冇字 one in ta. So we just change it and it works. If you just want to show, if you're not very good with Yutpeng like me, I have done somewhere around 150,000 characters of Yutpeng and I'm still very bad. 如果你Yutpeng唔係好精準嘅話，譬如我哋打幾個字啊，我識講嘅可能係行人。But maybe I don't know whether it is hung, double A, N, no N. What you can do is there's a version of BF Cantonese that is called only Yutpeng. So if you change the font to that only Yutpeng font, then you only get a Yutpeng. And it becomes something like a quiz for your student. What characters can this be? There's a bunch of things in 3F Cantonese that relates to the use of these kind of bracket. I'm going to call them braces. 成個粵語字體裏邊有好多功能都係圍繞住呢個花括號我會叫。The most simplest usage of the braces is when you put an English word in there and then you close the brace and what you will find is that it do a translation. The vocabulary size is about 3,000-4,000 words. So if you are getting on a taxi in Hong Kong and you say Admiralty, and the taxi driver tell you 邊度啊, then you can pull out your iPad and you go 金鐘. So it works with a lot of places in Hong Kong. It works whether it is pluralized. It works even if you capitalize it. It's quite general purpose. David is asking about toggling Yutpeng. What you have noticed, David, is a thing that is a thing that I have troubleshoot with one of the Apple devs, and I actually have exactly what you need to show you here. So David asked why when he create a new presentation, it doesn't seem to work. What happened here is that when you create a new presentation, the title here have a character spacing that is not 0. Let me show you where that is. When you come along here and you make the character spacing, normally it is here. If you were to make it larger than 5, 3, 2, 1, keep your eye on the characters. What happened is that it required ligature, and Apple didn't know what to do with ligatures. How should you combine characters when the characters are pulled quite far apart? So what they chose to do in earlier versions, by earlier versions, I mean about 1 or 2 months ago, is that they decide that anything that is not exactly 0, they would disable ligatures. I've worked with them, and now it is -5 to +5. So on new version of Keynote and new macOS, this should just work even for titles. New territories doesn't translate to Sun Guy. We can add that in future editions of the dictionary. Good, so this is the first one. The translation is the first feature. The second feature that maybe you will be useful, I was a teacher, and I think it is true for a lot of teachers that you're not always completely hacking your time, and sometimes you just jam. There are teachable moments that you just want to. People talk about idioms, people talk about saying, people talk about 歇後語, some of those funny puzzle puns we have in Cantonese. You want to bring up something, but you just go blank. You don't know what you want to talk or say. 你想講緊成語，你想拉幾句成語落嚟，但係你又諗唔到有咩成語係好簡單。Then what you can do here is you can type idiom with a number, and you close the brace. You change it to a different number, and you get a different idiom. If you make it larger, then it becomes a bit more tricky ones. And you can do the same thing for saying. So there are things that doesn't fit in an idiom. And you can cycle through these, and there's a complete documentation about what it is in the font download. I hope I'm picking something that is appropriate. It's just kind of random. I'm sorry. What is 公用電話 as a 歇後語? This is public telephone. When someone say 我哋做嘢公用電話, when our work here is public telephone, what does that mean? This is one of those puzzle puns, and what you can do is you can add a question mark to the syntax and you close the brace, then you see the second half. 冇錢冇得傾, no money, no talk. Yeah. Public telephone, no money, no talk. Anna Pondonton, Mao Ji is saying, and yeah, I don't know. I cannot even pronounce that. Ken is having a question about can you make a Cantonese webpage annotation so that when it has Chinese text and sorry, I saw David's question and I couldn't stop laughing. Okay, let us go to Yalkana's question, even though that is really the next one over. We'll come back to this, yeah? If I forget, remind me. So what if we have a Chinese web page? There's a way that you can just turn on, and now you get all the 粵拼 on any of your web pages. We'll come back to this a little later. Let me duplicate and get to a. One of the other problem with teaching Cantonese，廣東話另一個問題係有好多嘢我哋係可能知道，但係唔係好知點表達。Maybe we are teaching and we know that we want to talk about. It's important to talk about measure words 量詞, but there's so many of them and it's not so clear where we should start. So it also builds in some measure words, and you can ask for examples. And you can ask for an explanation what it is for.
You
can do the same thing for your final particles. You can do, I think it's part. Is that true? No, I forgot what it is. Final. And you get an example for how you would use that. Oh, not appropriate. 你大我啊. So now you get the correct pronunciation of the thing together with a way of actually using it. 入境處有信俾我，唔係啩? So you get the correct pronunciation alongside. Translation. Reference, translation, references, grammar references. Let me change this to a regular 粵拼 font. Maybe you are teaching and you want to say. And you want to tell your students there are parts of speech, although it's not very well mapped to Chinese. Then you can go parts of speech. And this is a noun that is 3 letters long. And now you go 入境處. So you can use this to mark off parts of speeches. Let me pull you an example of what this would look like. These are things I'm using to train my wife. So maybe you go that they're all exactly the same tones. And then you can annotate them directly just by typing on the keyboard. Everything is real time, and it makes it very easy to do live teaching. Some of the other things that are interesting here is that maybe you want to show an English translation and you want to say this particular pair of words, and you don't want to take your laser pointer and you go draw circles. Then you can come and say the third word that we're talking about, and it helps you mark off characters with very clear ways of, so everyone can see. 冇即係冇 adverb. His question is about my knowledge or the lack thereof of syntax. He believed that this is adverb, so we go adverb. If your question is what kind of parts of speech there are, it is in the documentation, mostly following, I don't know if you can see this. This is 鄧思榮教授2015年嘅粵語語法講義. This is the same system that's being used on words.hk. So there's a lot of standardization that I'm kind of implicitly trying to make happen. Okay, we pause here for a second round of question and answer, and fire away on special functions or anything we have talked about so far.
Oh, I kind of have a question. I thought I have the font downloaded from somewhere in May. So a lot of the things I try to follow along and do right now, I couldn't
This is
do. Like,
a
for example,
2.8 update that
okay,
has been released in August.
okay, perfect. Yeah, I was
So
wondering
you,
why.
when you go back to the website, you will be able to download it. The updates are free. We try to support you as reasonable. So updates like this is free. And if you already have, say, a pass, you can get the new fonts like these education font. Why it's called education? Because in Hong Kong, it is quite important for children to write characters exactly the way that the Education Bureau wants them to write it. So there are very special forms that the deal has to go through. Otherwise, you get a big cross. So this is really there to make them happy and make it useful to go in school.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Andrea here.
Hi, Andrea.
I had a technical issues. So when I try to download the fonts, and you see like you have black and white and also the color one. So it seems like I can't download them. I can't install them like all together.
They
So
cannot
it's like
be,
either
they
one or
cannot
two.
be in, it is only one or the other. And the only reason why the black and white version was made is so people who do not have a system which support color, like a e-reader, it doesn't make you a black and white e-reader color, can have a version that works. And why they are exactly the same, and because they are exactly the same, they cannot be installed side by side. As to why they are exactly the same, it is so that when people prepare a document that is in color, send it to someone who only have a system that renders black and white, they can still see exactly what you see.
That makes sense. Talking about accessibilities, will this color also accessible? Kind of like the how the color.
If you are talking about accessibility
visual, for visual.
As in formal contrast and all that, I don't have a very good answer for you. What I can tell you is that the colors are picked so that they work on dark backgrounds. They work on white light backgrounds. They work when you print it out. And they work when you print it out in monochrome, even though you have prepared it in color. I have tried them all.
Yeah, I think my question is more like if someone who may have, or they may be partially blind or colorblind, that will they have trouble? Sometimes when
I don't know.
people have I
don't know.
Okay.
If there are no other questions, then I'm going to very quickly show you that it can be used in a number of contexts. It includes if you install a Chrome extension, then you can use what is included in the package and simply import that package. And what you will find is that you can make it work on websites. What that means is you can read Wikipedia, you can read the news, you can use it for Spotify lyrics, you can play the lyrics, live. I hope this is not going to disturb your ears. You can use it in advertisement. You can use it. Sorry, let me turn off my sound. So
I discovered that the feel of love and how to show that is very similar here and in what.
So you can use it in YouTube videos. You can bake it into lyrics if you are preparing videos. You can use it with 零二四三, so you can write lyrics with it and see what the tones are going to be. One of the killer applications for people teaching is you can use it with type.web, where you turn it on and then you can type without installing anything other than the font. And now you can see both the Chinese and the English at the same time. And on that note, I am going to pass it on to Mozai and the Cantonese Alliance volunteers to talk about what they have been doing with the font.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, looks good. So during the summer, I led a Cantonese chat room on Wednesdays for the Cantonese Alliance. And one of our well-received activities was analyzing lyrics of songs. And so I would paste the lyrics into Microsoft Word, where you could see the Yutping on here. So volunteers and students could sing along, or they could read out the lyrics, and it was convenient for that. One of the things I didn't realize to do is in these vocabulary notes, I did not use the fonts, but that would have been more convenient instead of having to type out the Yuping separately. Yes. So I have a few of these right here. This is Qin Qin Kutgo. This was our last karaoke day. Not much over here. And then, let me see. Oh, 半斤八兩. And so, yeah, through this, I was able to just like copy and paste the lyrics without having to manually type out the Yutping or generate it and then proofread it myself, which I thought was very helpful while I was teaching. I have one more file that I can't seem to find. It was for Hongyat, the one by Lei Hakan. But yeah, I thought that this tool was very, very useful. During my teaching, it heavily simplified the handout making process and made it so that I didn't have to use as much time as I would have in order to type out the Yutping for each song. And so, yes, it's very grateful that I have access to this tool.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like there's any issue. So, hi, John. I haven't spoke to you in a while. Thank you for presenting and your hard work. So me and John, I'm not going to say we go way back or anything, but I was one of the, I think, earlier adopters of the tool. You can see some of this, the docs I have are pretty dated, but all of these lesson plans, they're not exhaustive. I have a couple more, but yeah, I was using it since maybe September, and I stopped teaching about maybe at the beginning of the summer, so kind of stops and sometime there. But I don't have a lot of I haven't used a lot of new features, so I was using more of the basic things, very similar to what Mozai was doing. So for example, this is a lesson plan that I drew up. I don't remember if I was teaching on Wednesday or Thursday. It's been that long, but yeah, I had a good group going, and this was one of the lessons we were learning some Sanhua, 中国 Sanhua, like Chinese mythology. This one was called 夸父追日. I had to type this out manually from this little book of mythology that I had, but obviously it made it very easy for people to read. I think I had 虚民语 on one side and 好语 on the other, so I was typing the Mandarin, standard Mandarin on the left, and my kind of translation of it on the right. But yeah, that's an example of how I was using it, so not too different than Mozai. This is something else that this is more of a project that I never finished. So there's a Chinese classic called Liu Zai Ji, Strange Tales from the Chinese studio. And there's a Chinese 36 episode kind of like concatenated version, a shorter version of the whole book. The whole book is like 1,000, maybe 2,000 pages, depending on what you have. So 36 episodes, 30 minutes long, is probably only like 5 to 10% of the whole Liu Zaizi. But anyway, I looked at I really liked what I heard, and I tried to make sort of a listener's guide to anyone who wasn't interested in learning it. At some point in my learning groups, I wanted to do a book club, but it didn't really pan out. But anyway, so I had kind of four columns here. So this is like a timestamp. There's a Chinese word that is difficult, or something I found difficult at the time. That was like 2 years ago. There's a translation and then extra notes. So for example, I have a lot of trouble with proper nouns in Chinese. So like Liu Zaiji is not something you would know until you heard it like 10 times and like, oh yeah, that's the book. That's a Chinese classic. Or for example, let me see. Po Chongling is the author of Liu Zaiji, and if you hear that in a podcast or a TV, you're gonna have a pretty hard time learning it until possibly you know the Chinese character or you know what it looks like in Yutping. So yeah, this is the whole thing for 30 minutes long episode. Ideally, I would have done this for 36 episodes, but I just frankly don't have the time. The last thing is kind of niche. I like to compose, but I compose in very strange, squiggly looking lines. I've shown this to John before and he seemed interested, but ultimately, yeah, this is Byzantine chant. It's the notation used by the Eastern Orthodox Church in the Balkans and Greece. This is a very traditional hymn from God knows when, I don't know, but eventually I'd like to teach my daughter some of this, and obviously learning this very enigmatic notation along with Chinese is not going to be easy, so this kind of makes it one step easier. There's Alleluia, 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 and then this is just my translation of that hymn. But yeah, that's about it for all I have. It's nothing complicated. Something I didn't realize I could do until I kind of tried it. It's very simple to change. As long as you have, you know, the font installed, I could plug it into this computer. I mean, this program. Anyway, yeah, that's all I had to share. Thank you, John, and thank you everyone listening.
Not directly, because this serves a very similar function there. And so whatever website you already can see the Yutping that comes along. And if you're talking about outputting Yutping for computational purposes, that is something I'm working on. It's a bit surprising, but I actually am not a programmer. So I'm learning this. I learned so that I can make the font, and writing a parser is something completely different in difficulty for me. So it's slow going, but it's working. While Serif is talking about doing the transcript, okay, I'm going to show this last thing, then we're going to go to the after party. One thing that I thought had been sorely missing in the Cantonese learning and teaching world are material for kind of immersion, things that you just listen to and appropriate for maybe heritage speaker, people at intermediate and advanced level, because there just isn't these kind of material available before. What we have as subtitles is, apart from what Help in Cantonese Alliance and the subtitle crew do, they're always in Suminyu, they're always in literal Chinese, standard written Chinese, and they are always omitting the final particles or the utterance that make it important. So one thing that I had been working on, and it's been quite hard work here, making the right connections, is so that we have a collection of these radio drama such that you can play.
How come there's Spanish as well?
What is quite interesting here, let me skip to another section. We can change it, the playback speed, to maybe half the speed. Thanks, Quarky, for finding that.
靜靜雞爆個秘密俾你聽啊！當然佢話想俾個經
My voice sound even more slow. But it's helpful for people who is just picking up the language. You can change it. You can turn on and off the Yutpeng to help yourself. You can turn on and off the language. I've got this thing translated half machine, half by hand to somewhere like 7 or 8 languages. So it's not just restricted to English speakers. I'm working with a radio station, and we have produced, you have heard my voice because I was part of the production, and we have produced 13 episodes. So maybe about 7 hours of these plays. I'm probably going to do half of those in this fashion because it's quite tedious. And on that note, I'm going to actually stop the recording. So if you have questions you want to ask, more technical ones, then more commercial secret ones, we can talk about those.